As the airspeed decreases below 70 knots, you can easily see how much the angle of attack must increase to keep the airplane in the air at this slower speed. You can fly an airplane at any speed between cruise speed and stall speed. Now, what's stall speed? Well, that's coming up in a future lesson. The most important thing here is to understand that as you slow the airplane down, you must increase its angle of attack to maintain the desired flight condition, which, in our situation, was straight and level flight. And you'll need to add power to remain in straight and level flight. Are you ready? Let's go. Reduce the power to about 1500 RPM and allow the airspeed to slow to 60 knots. Slow down. You're too low. Climb. Slow down. You're too low. Climb. When you get there, you'll have to increase the power to nearly 2,000 RPM to maintain 4,000 feet at 60 knots. You're too low. Climb. Make small adjustments to pitch to maintain 60 knots and adjustments to power to hold 4,000 feet. Use sufficient nose-up trim to reduce the back pressure needed on the joystick to keep the airplane in this attitude. This is how you enter slow flight while maintaining your altitude. So, if you're following a slower airplane as you're approaching to land, at least you know how to slow down to avoid chewing off the tail of his airplane with your propeller, right? This is also another reason why we practice slow flight. You're too low. Climb. Excellent. Now I want you to exit slow flight and return to straight and level flight at 4,000 feet. I'm still controlling the bank for you while you do the rest. I want you to add power and simultaneously lower the nose. As the airplane begins to accelerate, lower the nose at a rate that allows you to maintain altitude. See how the airplane is accelerating while maintaining altitude? Fantastic. When you reach 100 knots, reduce power to 2,500 RPM and trim for cruise flight. You're too low. Climb. Bank the wings less. Bank the wings less. When you reach 100 knots, reduce engine RPM to maintain 100 knots. Speed up. You're too high. Descend. You're too high. Descend. Slow down. Push the throttle in more. Slow down. You're too low. Climb. Bank the wings less. You're too low. Climb. Push the throttle in more. You're too low. Climb. This is how you exit slow flight and return to a faster cruise flight condition. You remember when I said we always use attitude, power, and one is when exiting slow flight. It's best to add power and simultaneously lower the nose. If we lowered the nose first, then added power, we might lose a little altitude as we accelerate. No sense doing this if we don't have to. You can see that in order to maintain altitude, you must decrease the wing's angle of attack. Do you see how a faster speed allows the airplane to fly at a lower angle of attack? Can you see the relationship between angle of attack and airspeed? Now, if you're not getting this, refer to the ground school session on the topic of slow flight. This is a very important topic, and you must understand the aerodynamics involved here for any of this to make sense. I think you probably have many questions, but now it's time to practice on your own. I'm going to cut you loose to practice entering and exiting slow flight. So practice flying at speeds between 100 knots and 50 knots. Hopefully this won't put knots in your stomach. Make sure you maintain altitude as you do this, and if you're feeling daring, you can even try a small turn while you're in slow flight. Just add power as necessary to maintain altitude and adjust that pitch to maintain your airspeed. In this lesson, we're going to slip those surly bonds of Earth and take our rightful place in the air where we belong. In other words, takeoffs. We're here in the Cessna 172 SP at the hold short line of runway 19 at Bremerton National Airport in Bremerton, Washington. We aren't going anywhere just yet, so relax just a second. Takeoffs are easy, and it's great to get airborne. There's not much to it. As you probably remember, all you had to do is set full power and steer down the center of the runway. When you get enough speed, simply raise the nose a bit and the airplane will take off. All we're doing here is accelerating to a sufficient speed so that the wings can generate the lift necessary to keep us in the air. We do, however, want to make sure of a couple things first. The most important thing to remember is that we always take off into the wind when possible. By pointing into the wind, we start with a little air blowing over our wings to begin with. This means that we'll be able to reach our minimum liftoff speed of 55 knots sooner and become airborne sooner. In the process, we'll use less runway during the takeoff roll. Today, we have calm winds, so takeoff direction isn't an issue. Check the final approach path for airplanes. Use the hat switch or make sure your numlock light is on and press the number 4 key on the numeric keypad. Then check the runway for airplanes by using the hat switch or the number 6 key. If the final approach path is clear, we can taxi onto the runway. As soon as we taxi onto the actual runway surface, that runway belongs to us and no one else should be using it. Set the parking brake. As soon as we taxi onto the actual runway surface, move the stick all the way to the right, or if you have a joystick you can twist it all the way to the right to line yourself up with it. Then return the stick to the center once you're pointed the right way and come to a stop by using the period key or the trigger on the joystick. Use that precious runway, and one of the most useless things in aviation is the runway that's behind you. Are you ready? Let's go. right, Captain. Let's do the before takeoff checklist. Cabin doors and windows closed and locked. Flight controls free and correct. Fuel selector both. Mixture full rich. Elevator trim at takeoff setting. Before takeoff checklist is now complete. Of course, in a real airplane, we take a lot more time to complete this. But now it's time to fly. Take a deep breath, let it out, and apply full power with the throttle or by pressing F4. Check the airspeed indicator. When it reaches 55 knots, gently ease back on the joystick to establish a climb attitude. This is called rotation and has nothing to do with the airplane's tires. Pull back on the stick. Look at the attitude indicator. Make sure the little orange dot is on the second line in the blue part. This gives you the approximate attitude necessary for takeoff. Keep it there until the airspeed reaches 75 knots. As soon as it does, increase the climb attitude a little further until you're about 12.5 degrees nose-up pitch, which is between the second and third lines. Adjust the pitch up or down slightly, as necessary, to maintain 75 knots during the initial part of the climb. Okay, although I try never to say that's about all there is to it, well, that's about all there is to it. Of course, there's a lot more to it than that. You'll need to worry about crosswind takeoffs, traffic patterns, air traffic control, other airplanes, and 100 other things. But now you understand some of the most important aspects of the takeoff. You can end this lesson by pressing the escape key, or you can rerun it by pressing the control and semicolon keys. As with all things in aviation, the best advice I can give you regarding takeoffs is practice, practice, practice.